All right, so I want to go over a couple of things that came up in last class about rendering to Enscape. And we don't have kind of old videos already created for this because last year's class didn't really have access to Enscape and it really hadn't been added to Revit yet either. So for most of you, when you downloaded Enscape, if you checked the box to have it link basically to SketchUp and Revit, if it's on Revit, it's going to be here. You can always re-download it. And again, check that box to have it like link in with Revit. So now it's embedded in Revit. That's kind of a new version of what Enscape's doing. One of the things too is I think some of the confusion is, again, you're working in SketchUp, you see how seamlessly Enscape works in SketchUp. Enscape was originally created as a SketchUp add-on, but as it became more popular, the company now also works with Rhino, which is also used in the architecture industry, and Revit. So this is why it's not always a perfect mesh in with Revit, because they're also using completely different programming to basically make their 3D objects. So that's where some of that disconnect happens. And this happens also in any kind of like animation programming too. There's different programming languages how 3D objects are created. So that's just a very simple answer to this. So in the other day's class, I showed you various ways you can render. So within Revit, I have this lobby reception area here. These guys are from Enscape. I'll show you in a few minutes how I put them in if you want to use them, but I want to show you kind of what are sort of the catches to this. So obviously when it comes in here, it looks like a gray blob. If I wanted to use Revit's rendering system, which is here under view and then render and rendering cloud, what happens is, and I'll kind of bring it up, I have a picture of it already. Actually, here it is up here. Let's see, we'll go over to it. All right, so here it is here. So this is the one where if we go back to Revit, let me bring it up here. I picked rendering cloud. It went to the Autodesk Revit site that renders it for me for free. This is what it now looks like. So it can't read. So Revit's rendering from this kind of website here cannot read the materials in this. You get a blob. All right. So if you're going to render this way, don't use Enscape assets. If you're going to render with Enscape, you can. So what'll happen is to render it and to add them, you go over here to the Enscape tab. I'll do a separate video and kind of near the end here how to add these things in and move it around, but I just want you to see the differences right now. So it's currently live updating, meaning I've already ran a render. Normally there'd be a little green button there. So what it's doing is saying, if I add more stuff, my render is going to automatically update. So here's my render here. So these flowers came in just fine, really nicely. Myself visually, I prefer rendering in Enscape. It's coming out really nice. And I'll walk you through how to save this and stuff, but you can literally just kind of like snip screen and save this. You can, again, you're going to want to play around because the angle is going to be slightly different than where you set it up in Revit. So if you look at here in Revit, here's kind of where I initially set up my shot for like last year when I rendered just in Revit. But now it's connected to this file here. So I can pivot around and I can just use my mouse and kind of go in and out. And again, I would sort of set it up to whatever like shot that like photo I want to use. But honestly, I would save this, crop this, and probably still do a little bit more work in Photoshop too to set that up. I'll talk about it, the pictures in the background for a minute too. Let me show you the difference with that. So if you're going with Enscape, great. These stuff will work really nicely. They'll show up. You don't have to worry about the gray blob. If you're not going to render this way and instead you're going to render here to the cloud, like to the cloud, don't use Enscape objects because they won't play nice. One of the things to notice is our view out the window. So I have a whole separate video on this that I'll explain more later, but currently, if I'm rendering in Revit, there is one view out this window, right? And that actually works really well. You can also do this part in Photoshop too. It tends to be a little bit easier in Photoshop. There's, like I said, a whole nother video on that too. If you're concerned about the view out the window using Enscape, Anthony and I will basically help you find an image because it's doing a 360 wrap around your window. It's called an HDR image. And like I said, it's literally wrapping around as if it were the real world outside your window. This can sometimes be a little quirky. My case, it worked out pretty nice. Like I'm fine with that view. Again, it looks like I'm somewhere in a city. It's not, it's not making or breaking my picture here. There's other angles for my model where this hits outside my window is not super attractive, or maybe I wanted to make it look more like it's in Chicago and have actually Chicago out the window. That's kind of stuff where, depending on your needs, Anthony and I will help you with that. So again, this is mostly just to show you kind of what our difference is. So this is rendering to the cloud. Don't use Enscape. If you're going to get your final image off of Enscape, these flowers and stuff will work just fine. And now I'm going to show you how to put in assets. I'm going to stop recording and just make a shorter video of that too.